Pedro Meyer is a Brazilian singer, musician, and songwriter, as well as a teammate of mine at Easton Training Center. He is a former Thai Boxing Association national champion. Like me, he's a challenger on the Enneagram personality typing system. And on today's episode, we dig deep into what that means for both of us as it pertains to vulnerability, betrayal, trusting others, and relationships. I feel like this is a really important conversation to have today as we connect over similarities being raised by primarily women and the feminine influences in our lives and how that shows up in our relationships today. If Pedro's story resonates with you today, please follow him on Instagram at The Warrior Poet and share this episode with one person that you feel would get value out of today's conversation. Before we get into today's episode, I'd like to ask you a huge favor. Please head on over to your favorite podcast platform and give us a 5-star rating and a written review. That really helps us get the message out to more people who are looking to view the world through a different lens. Specifically on today's conversation, we take a look at our world through the Enneagram, self-awareness, attachment styles, and leadership. Without further delay, let's get into today's episode with Pedro Meyer. Thank you so much for inviting me to your home to record this podcast.
My pleasure.
We've known each other for a few years, but we've never really sat down and had a conversation like this. So thank you.
I might as well record it, right?
Exactly. We have a lot in common. We first met at a live event that we put on for the podcast. We both know Jessica Smith, and then she invited you to come, and that's where we met. Mm-hmm. And then we both discovered that we were Easton teammates that night.
Exactly. It all comes full circle. It's a small city.
Small city, such a small city. And so your work at Easton, and what is your actual role at Easton?
I am a Muay Thai coach. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I used to be the department head. Now I'm the Muay Thai coach, and I am one of the athletes at the Muay Thai competition team.
Mm-hmm. And you have a competition coming up here pretty soon?
Yeah. It's coming up in a month or so. It's the TBAs is the biggest amateur national tournament that we have. Actually, they take on pros now, so I guess we don't need to call it amateur anymore. But yeah, it's coming up soon. It's a big deal for everybody, so we're all hands on deck for that one.
Mm-hmm. So how do you prepare being a coach and an athlete?
You decide. You basically choose in the beginning of camp if you're going to be a coach or an athlete. And it's tough because I'm preparing some other guys for other competitions, but I feel like it's pretty clear, like I'm a coach now, I'm an athlete now. Because for you to be an athlete, you have to have a little bit of selfishness. Where you're a coach, you're completely selfless. And it's a tough balance. But it's like there's a time from 7 to 8, that's my time to be selfish. From 6 to 7 is my time to give in. Mm-hmm. But I feel like both feed off of each other. If you know how to balance this well, I gain as much as whoever it is that I'm giving to. So
yeah, I was actually going to ask you about that because like coaching for me over the 10 years of being a strength coach and getting into the jiu-jitsu world, being a coach is not entirely selfless because we do get, I've learned more from my clients than I believe that I could ever teach them.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like it requires a lot of self-awareness to be able to translate something that now you're talking to an adult, right? So every time I'm like, oh, I'm a coach at this gym, people are like, oh, you're gonna go teach the little kids. It's like, no, I'm teaching guys who are like turning to pros. Teaching, I'm training them. Teaching it's a broad term, but it requires you to be very aware of where these people are coming from because, you know, on the topic of masculinity, just kind of putting it out there already, it's very tough to get a grown man and be like, hey, you're not punching right. You know what I mean? Mm. You have to do this or you have to do that. So there is a certain level of sensitivity that you have to get information through other people. And for you to develop that, you have to learn how to say the same thing 4 different ways. Right. 4, 5, 6 different ways.
Right.
So teaching really helped me even understand things on my own, not only physically with the sport itself, but feelings of frustration, of why plateauing, like why am I not getting better? Why am I not doing this? Why am I not getting enough attention? That kind of stuff you develop by teaching way more than you develop by competing. That's for sure.
Yeah. I can relate so much because what I hear you describing is like this mutual humility that it takes to both be a coach, understanding that one way that you say it isn't necessarily going to land with everybody, so you have to have more tools in your toolbox. And then your athlete has to be also accepting of that coaching feedback, which means they have to bring humility to the table as well.
Absolutely. And it's really the idea of efficiency. You know, to me, in the world in general, I guess, we think a lot about how we're going to feel, how the other person's going to feel, what's going to happen. But really, if you're really trying to get a job done, all those walls have to be down, because that's just wasting time, right? So if you come from a place that, look, athlete, I care about you. Hey, athlete. Hey, coach, I care about you. All right, we care about each other. Now we can take all this bullshit aside, all the walking on eggshells and all that stuff, and just be like, all right, you're doing this wrong. This is what you could do better, in a way that is productive, right? Instead of just like, obviously you don't want to just shit on somebody, because then they're going to be resistant to the feedback, and vice versa, right? That happens from athlete to coach all the time. And that's how you grow together. And this is for any kind of relationship. This one is it's a particular relationship, because if you don't have that down, people can really get hurt. And I feel like that's the little extra sauce to this kind of relationship that makes everything a little more chaotic, but also more efficient. You get it done quick.
Yeah. We only have a certain amount of time that we can spend with teammates and coaches and clients. So we have to be efficient in that situation. And I love that we're talking about humility right now in the context of masculinity, because in this day and age, the term toxic masculinity gets thrown around, and we were talking about it just a moment ago. And in that context, there is no humility, right? It's almost this facade, this bravado of like either lone wolf or tough guy or impervious to hurt. You know, I can relate a lot to that.
Absolutely. It's tough, right? Because it's all words, you know, toxic masculinity, femininity, they're all words, and we develop our own visuals and meanings on the words, right? So it can mean a lot of things. Literally just now I was going down the elevator to pick you up, and I was scrolling through Instagram, and I saw this video of, it was like a military base, and this guy was trying to do a 680-pound deadlift. And everybody around was screaming, and that is a very masculine thing. Like to us, we get fired up, and to anybody around there, they could very easily see that as toxic masculinity, because it depends on how they portray that in their minds, right? But it's the same way as like some women feel very feminine when they put their dress and they do the pedicure, and men do too, right? So the point is, what is it that makes you feel more like yourself? Masculine, feminine, whatever it is. If you're a man and feeling feminine, it doesn't matter, right? What makes you feel more like yourself? And having the humility to dig into those things past what is expected or what you think is expected of you, that's really where it gets tough, right? This is why these conversations are awesome, and this is why this podcast is pretty badass.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it. What I hear you talking about is the stories that we create from a lot of generalizations around passed down to us through education, through family systems, through our friend groups. You know, not sure if you can relate to this, but I was taught what masculinity is both by my father and then by my friend group growing up. You know, I had maybe like 2 or 3 different circles of friends growing up. My brother-in-law and I both had a faith-based relationship. That's how we knew each other. We were neighbors, and he's still married to my sister now. So I saw one version of it there, and then saw a version of it in his father as well, who our families were connected for the 6 years before the kids graduated and went off to college. And then I had the other neighborhood kids who were, you know, lighting off firecrackers and BB guns and playing basketball and hoops and hockey and football in the street. And, you know, that was a little bit more charged of an environment where we never shied away from the conflict, right? And then school group and then church group and things like that. So we have a lot of different influences in our lives growing up. And you're Brazilian, right?
Yeah.
So when in your family time history did you come to America?
I came when I was 23.
Oh, okay.
I'm 31 now. So that was like 7 years ago.
Okay.
So when I say that I'm from Brazil, like I'm from Brazil,
Yeah.
I was raised there, I was born there. Never in my life I thought I was going to speak English or any other language every single day of my life, let alone do a podcast in English. You know what I mean? To me, this is all very surreal. But you're right. And I feel like this is where things get tricky. You get a lot of influences from different places, and it's up to you to filter which ones are important or not, right? So like in my experience, the person that taught me the most about masculinity was my mom, right? I was raised by my mom, my grandmother. I have a twin brother who's gay. So it's like super feminine energy already, right? Most of like 5 of my 7 best friends in high school, men friends, 5 of 7 are gay too. So like my dad was a songwriter, so he was also very feminine, not very confrontational. So I was always around very feminine in energy, right? But growing up, I was like into samurais and sword fighting and Power Rangers. So I always had that fire of sorts, right? That masculinity, if you will. And I feel like if you can bring in these influences in a way that you mold in a positive way, that is a reflection of how you feel on the inside. And it's not a reflection of what's masculinity, what's femininity. Toxic masculinity is really just masculinity translated through people who are not good with themselves.
Processing emotions, understanding self-awareness, things like that.
Exactly, right? Just being cool with yourself. I was watching this video from the School of Life, and they were talking about the 2 things that make you immature. So the 2 main things that translate immature actions, right? One is lack of trust in others, which I relate more than others.
All right.
And lack of self-worth. Those things, especially like lack of self-worth, leads you to give too much emphasis on what other people think about you. That translates into you accepting ideas of others about you that are not necessarily true, but you start believing it because now you need this environment that's going to reinforce whatever it is they want to reinforce. Which leads me to that great ideal that I think is like you choosing your friends and the people you spend time with. This is important because that's who you're feeding off of. It's an echo.
Yeah. Jim Rohn says that we're the sum of the 5 people we spend the most time with, or the average of the 5 people we spend the most time with. So what was it that you learned from your mom about masculinity that you bring today?
So my mom, poor mom, Mom, I love you. So my mom is a very interesting character because I think about life, like as a songwriter, I think about everything in terms of story, right? The characters, the plot. And my mom is a very interesting character because in the beginning, she was always very self-motivated. She was always doing it herself. She was raised by my grandmother, who's a very, very simple woman, like very religious, very, very simple. Like she was a very happy person with the simplicity that she had in her life. And my mom was like, now I have 2 kids. She got divorced when I was 2. My dad was a great guy, but not a great father necessarily, right? And so she had to kind of do everything herself. And you can see it in her that she didn't want to. Like she wanted help. She wanted people to do it for her. But she had this wall, this is me growing up. This is my visual, right? Of anger. Like everything that was against her beliefs, she would react very strongly about because she never really had anybody to talk to her. And when you're a kid, you think you're going to die. You think that this adult that it's your parents supposed to know everything is going to just
when she gets angry at you?
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And you or anyone else, right? Because it's extrapolates. And then she became a very mild person as my brother and I started growing up, and she started seeing that she can't really depend on just herself and all that stuff. And growing up with somebody who thinks that she can do everything by herself but doesn't really gives us the responsibility of start picking up some slack for her, right? So this idea of initiative, of being outspoken, of understanding what's behind the curtains when other people are doing certain things. For example, like my family, I'm very lucky that I have a very loving family, even though they are very crazy, right? We don't say I love you all the time, but we know, right? Mm-hmm. And we developed this thing where you don't always need to tell me what's wrong with you. But by the way you're reacting to whatever it is, I can tell that something's wrong. And I can take the initiative to go and do things for you to try to appease and talk. Like, hey, what's going on? So that initial sensitivity to what other people are feeling behind their actions is something that I got from my mom. Even if it was implicit, it's something that really happened. And I feel like that might not sound like the most masculine thing but I think it is. I think it's the most masculine thing you can do. It's taking your power as in your ability to create change and ability to create impact on a situation and use it for the good of people you care about, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I hear that as leadership.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep. And they call it now service leadership.
Servant leadership?
Exactly. Servant leadership. That's it. Which I think is one of the best coined slogans there are, mm-hmm. right? Terms, mm-hmm. because I think a leader is a servant. And look, I'm a very big samurai fan. Like when I was a kid, I was into samurai, and I started really reading into stories. I have the tattoos. Like mm-hmm. I am typical, right? And the word samurai is mean to serve, and it was a big part of me growing up, just studying the story and how serving somebody who you respect is the biggest honor. And that's where I feel, not only with other people around me, but kind of like a higher power where I'm serving the universe because I have to be grateful that the universe put me here in the first place, and I'm serving it by doing what I love or trying to do what I love and just be grateful with every moment. So mm-hmm. I don't know if this kind of went out on a tangent, but
no, I actually enjoy the thread of conversation because it brings up a lot for me. I can relate so much that when we serve others, we cannot ignore ourselves. Yeah. And when we do begin to ignore ourselves and put others first 100% of the time, then that takes our self-service and our self-leadership and our self-trust, and it puts it in others, which is what you were describing earlier about having trust in others, and then also what other dimension were you discussing? We were talking about
immature, the lack of self-worth.
Right, lack of self-worth. We're putting our worth in other people's view of us, and mm-hmm. and I love that you bring up the word immature because it's a better way to describe what toxic masculinity is represented by. When the masculine energy is not mature, this is how it shows up. No humility, no service, mm-hmm. no contribution to their community, and so much more.
100%. Yeah, no, that's a great way to see it. I didn't see it like that. That's a good point.
Mm-hmm. I see that in martial arts in general. You're talking about it in the samurai. I love the archetype of the samurai. Mm-hmm. This quiet, powerful leader, right? That's there to serve his community. Like, he's a protector and a warrior, but not a hero. Mm-hmm. You know, he would sacrifice himself for his community. And let me ask you about this calm demeanor that they have. I wouldn't exactly call it closed off. Mm-hmm. This might be me stereotyping the archetype. I don't know. But like, I still see them as a servant leader who's approachable. Am I getting that right?
Yeah. So like, there's the real life and there's the archetype. And I love the archetype. Like, I like the archetype. In truth, samurai up to like the 1600s, they were warriors, crazy people. And look, they did all sorts of crazy things like the Vikings did, rape and plunder. Like, the same way we can't say all men, all women, all samurai. It's a job, right? And their job was to serve daimyos, the owner of the feud, the land, right? Mm-hmm. After 1600, there was this one guy that got to power, and he established a unified country where they had peace for 300 years. 300 years with a bunch of warriors that don't have a war to fight. So that's when the Bushido, the samurai code, and the samurai ideology started developing. They were like, well, we have to create some sort of power around this imagery. And
like
it became
like a symbol.
Exactly, right?
Yeah.
And the main aspect of the Bushido, the samurai code, is acceptance of death. And that is the calm demeanor, that whole thing of like, it is what it is. Death was always next to them, as he always should be, right? Mm-hmm. So when I fight, when I have competitions, or even when I have shows, it's like death. It's life or death. If you accept defeat and victory in the lens that either way you're going to die at the end of the story, then the outcome is less important. What's important is really the journey, right? So accepting, and this is like, it's very grim, it sounds grim, but I feel like it's hopeful. You know, it puts us all in an even level, that we all gonna end up the same way. It's really how we live that makes it different. Mm-hmm. You know, my life to your life or whoever's life, the end is gonna be the same. Is our choices during the time we have. Mm-hmm. That's gonna make a difference. And this is why I always liked the idea of the samurai, because they became these poets and musicians and calligraphy and bonsai, because now they don't have any more wars. Even though they're still fighters, they have to develop something inside of them that is more important. And this is like the idea of a complete citizen that Socrates and Plato used to talk about already, you know? I love that idea. And I try to live myself like that. Like with relationships, I try to be as always learning. Like I hate the idea of being an expert. You got to always learn, because that ties into that humility thing, and mm-hmm. ties into being able to serve better the people who you love. Because why wouldn't you? Mm-hmm. You love them. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, that really hits home, and I can relate so much. Like, jiu-jitsu, martial arts in general, help us push to that edge of death. It's a simulated death.
Yeah.
I got put to sleep on the mat for the first time in 4.5 years.
What, today?
Like a month ago.
Nice.
Yeah. I just came from training, so I'm like still in the sparring like mindset, right? Uh-huh. But no, a Friday night, teammate put a pretty sick choke on me, and I'm like, there's no way I'm gonna get choked in this position, because I was in mount, right? Uh-huh. And he throws baseball bat on me, and he turns to his side, and I went out.
Yep.
It was my first time in jiu-jitsu facing death, like a simulated death. Mm-hmm. Where, you know, my body starts responding to death, and it pushed my edge. And it was the realization that things can end that quickly, symbolically, right?
Yeah. And it's true, right? If there was nobody there, if this guy really wanted to kill you and you were asleep, you're dead.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when you wake up and you have this additional clarity about what your life is supposed to be like, you can approach those moments of death in a simulated fashion, like martial arts, or like getting on stage as a musician. Oh, by the way, would you want to share a song with us? We could plug it in right here.
Let's do it.
Okay.
Hell yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, this is my first single. I love the song. It's about relationships. I feel like every songwriter is a little bit of a relationship snob. So here it is. It's called Strangers, on all platforms.
Thank you. Check this out, guys.
Risked it all for us to be with every day. We grew apart, we didn't know who hit us hard. And time came charging strong. He quickly brought along the truth behind the daily green. And I couldn't sleep at night, the peace was missing inside. My heart was weak, no, I couldn't sleep. There were days I couldn't find myself, searching for your happiness. There were days I couldn't make myself knees, and I will go where I belong. I faced it all, I'm going home. And I have my bags, my pride inside.
Awesome, Pedro. Thanks for letting us listen in on that song. Really appreciate you sharing that with us. Let's talk about the Enneagram, the Challenger, because we're both challengers on the Enneagram. Have you heard of it before I introduced it to you through the podcast?
No, but I read it. I read the whole thing, and I was like, wow, this is cool.
It's pretty spot on, isn't it?
Yeah.
So I feel like we're like connected in a lot of ways, a lot in common. We both do jiu-jitsu. We are both members of Easton. We're both passionate about relationships with others. We're both the Challenger on the Enneagram. And earlier you said trust in others. Mm-hmm. And that's a huge thing for the Challengers. Like, our greatest fear is betrayal, control, and manipulation.
Mine too.
Yeah. How does that show up for you?
So it's tough, right? So obviously everybody's a little different, but I feel like there is a certain way where if you are like, I'm just gonna talk for myself, right? I'm bad at extrapolating, but I take a lot of pleasure of getting people comfortable. Comfortable, not in the sense of like something is wrong, I'm just gonna pretend it's not. I'm saying, if you're in my house, like I cleaned the whole house today.
Because you knew I was coming over.
Because I knew you were coming over, right? And I've had people before, oh, you're so accommodating. I have 3 iPhone chargers on I don't have an iPhone. I have 3 different ones. You know what I mean?
Uh-huh.
And I enjoy that. But it's very easy to be taken advantage of because it's very easy for other people, even unconsciously, you know, to be like, oh, if he's cool doing it, I'm just going to keep letting it happen, right?
They're pushing boundaries.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And every time I talk about relationships with other people, I'm going from a place where everybody is somewhat adult, somewhat mature, right? I'm not talking about like narcissists and like those extremes, like sociopaths.
Yeah.
I am not qualified, right?
And to be clear, there's only about 5% of the population that fall underneath that category.
Right. So. Yeah. Don't even get me started with that. Everybody's a narcissist nowadays.
It's a term that gets thrown around a little bit too liberally.
Yeah.
And when we look at the numbers, we had an expert show come on the podcast, Dr. Fedrick, and she laid it out there. She said, everyone has a scale of 1 to 5 on narcissism. Everyone has a scale of 1 to 5 on codependency. So no one is absolved of these tendencies in their personality. When it's taken to that psychological extreme is where we get the 5%. I can see narcissism showing up in my life when I set really hard and fast boundaries, which is a tendency of the Challenger.
Yes. Yeah, and I do the same. I agree. And it's a matter of understanding what these are and trying to find the things. Like, ultimately, you have to know who you want to be and try to be that person. And you're never going to be perfect, but you're just going to be a little bit better every time. So in the end, like, trusting others is tough because it's very easy for you to be given and somebody just be like, wow, he likes giving, so let's just keep taking, you know? And sometimes that goes against your self-interest because everybody has a certain amount on the tank. Like, I have so much I'm trying to do, you know? Especially people like you and I, like, we want to accomplish shit that we haven't accomplished yet, right? And it takes work. Like, even training, like, even if it's just a hobbyist training situation, you sacrifice to be there at 9 p.m. for some smoker, some, like, not even a real fight, where your family is waiting for you at home.
Right.
There's all these little things that other people that are not on the same vibe don't understand. And now you're selfish or you're this or you're that.
Mm-hmm. And to clarify, a smoker is like an in-house tournament, a small scale where Muay Thai practitioners spar.
Yeah, so smoker is basically hard sparring against people you don't know.
And an official?
Yes.
Yeah, so it's a safe environment where people can take it up a notch.
Exactly. Yeah. That's exactly it.
Yeah.
So it's not even real, like, nothing is on the line. Most people don't win. Like, most smokers don't have a winner. So nothing's on the line, but you still have to make some sacrifices because you're in a goal. You have something that you're working towards. And if people are not on the same vibe, they see you as selfish. And to me, being seen as selfish is the worst thing in the world because I know I'm not. But then that leads me to sometimes give even more than I'm
to make up
for it. Mm-hmm. And some people take it. So, for example, I don't know if you know this, but in 2019, I was diagnosed with thyroid cancer, right?
I did not know that. Thank you for sharing.
So it was a wild ride because like I'm very close to my family. My family's not here. I told my mom, it was crazy, right? And I had my surgery, and after, I'm like, I can't give anything. I'm half dead, you know?
You may have to take a pause and receive in this time frame of your life.
It was, and it really was. And I remember my mom was here, and like, poor mom, again. Love you, mom. I took her to see Billy Joel, and that was so painful. But I was like, stone cold. I was like, yeah, mom, this is great. And it was great, but I couldn't look up. It was my neck, you know, I have a scar from here to here. And I was like, nah, it's cool. And then looking back in hindsight, I should have chilled way more than I did. But it's a tendency, and then you recognize the tendencies and you kind of fix it for the future, you know? Mm-hmm. And it comes that humbleness that we were talking about. I don't know if that's a word or not, but...
Humbleness, for sure, absolutely. Yeah. Humility,
yes.
Well, for challengers, that's really hard for us to even bring into our vocabulary.
Yeah.
Our tendency is to be so intense, and our weakness is lusting after that intensity. Mm-hmm. So I can totally relate that, like, you just had cancer surgery, and you're in a period of needing rest, but our personality shows through, even in our weakness, our weak times, to just push.
Yeah. And that's where you get hurt. In many ways, emotionally and physically. Mm-hmm. In the context of martial arts, that's very clear, right? My shoulder is toast because you think, oh, I'm good. I'm just gonna fight through the pain. Mm-hmm. And then you start losing track. And the way I try to bring perspective is like, what if I was my son? Like, I don't have kids, but I can only imagine, like, what if I am somebody from the outside that loves me unconditionally? Would I tell myself to chill? Would I tell myself to push? And this is a little bit of like the idea of being a better friend with yourself that ultimately leads you to better results. Mm-hmm. It's a weird thing, especially talking to men about this, because the mentality, the man mentality of like pushing and grinding and this is why we're here, is the money. Like all these slogans that we see on fights all the time with fighters, like this is all bravado that you're just saying to try to convince yourself that you can do something that you don't really believe that you can do. Mm-hmm. Once you're in that peace of mind that you are friends with yourself and you can be a little more sensitive to yourself and your needs and whatever, things are smooth. Right. Smoother, I guess. Right.
Yeah, I hear you talking about trusting yourself. Mm-hmm. Trusting yourself first and understanding that self-care is more than just like good night's sleep and good nutrition. It's also how we speak to how we speak to ourselves. It's also how and who we let into our lives, into our inner circle.
100%. I actually did a post on TikTok yesterday about this self-care, right? So there's this huge trend now about self-care and being like this positive vibes only and positivity, da-da-da. I believe, and I saw this on this video of the School of Life, and they said it much better than I could have ever said. But life is not about being happy and positive. We really bond when we all come together and agree that life is hard. And we are all doing our best, right? And as long as we kind of interact on that playing field that, look, I don't care if you have a Ferrari, if you have a Toyota, if you don't have a car, everybody has a problem. Like, obviously, if some billionaire comes here, I'll be like, yeah, I wish I had your money, but this guy might not have the same confidence that I have. And ultimately, it just really comes down to self-awareness, like we were talking about, right? What is the worst thing that can happen, and how would I react to it? Like when I had the cancer, I had symptoms, but I didn't know it was cancer. So I made a list of all the possible things that could be. And I thought I was going to die. And I was like, well, if this is the worst thing that can happen, how would I react? What should I do? What would I do? It's very stoic kind of mindset, right? Instead of the more divine, like classic divine thing of, oh, it happens for a reason. You turned the reason. You made the reason. Something happened. And now you have to get a lesson out of it, right? And I feel like that's kind of the thing that motivates people to kind of get through. Because shit keeps happening, and it will keep happening. You know.
Sounds really hard, man. And thank you for sharing that. What we find with men is it takes a really rough patch or a really rough moment in their lives to make change.
That makes sense.
Can you think of a time in your life that you're like, from here on out, my life is going to be different?
Yeah, well, definitely cancer. It's a big one. But like...
Yeah, I knew you before the cancer diagnosis because we met in 2018.
Yeah.
So I would, maybe this is a story I created in my mind, but I feel like you were already doing the work before I met you.
Yeah, so I've always have an interest of being the best I can be, right? Because I feel like there's no point living a life where you're just cruising. And I have no fear of, like, the way I think about it is like, what if I die today? What happens now? Like, sure, I didn't accomplish everything I wanted. And this comes from my, like, the samurai thing that I've always kind of had that fantasy in my head. What would happen, you know? And the other thing is, like, one of the things that I've always hear about, and this is something that now is more important to me than ever, is like, if somebody were to talk shit about me to somebody else, would this person believe it? Right? I try to live my life and act in a way that, oh, this guy, he was being a creep to those girls. Nobody's going to believe it. I hope. Because that's just not who I am, right? And I feel like that is the thing that gave me self-confidence and made me feel at ease living my life. So this groundwork of, this is who I want to be, this is what I'm going to try to do to get to where I want to be, gives you space to actually do the things that you're trying to do, like music, training, whatever, because you can't just have everything conflicting, you know? So I don't know if I had like a very specific moment that was like traumatizing, but honestly, there's another thing, I did a therapy session once, and she was showing me this whole new thing of archetypes, and she was saying that I was an island, and that islands have a tendency of ignoring past problems and turning them into good ideas, and then that in consequence makes you not work on the thing that the problem created, right? So I don't know, maybe my mom and my dad being divorced since I was 2 had a huge impact on me later on. I wish my dad was more present. I was very good friends with him later on. I was always very good friends with him, but we didn't live together, so we would see each other every other week. I don't know, maybe that was a big impactful thing that generated that kind of need to fill in the gaps. Like the fact that I was with my grandmother, my mom was out working, my dad was doing his thing. I kind of had to educate myself and choose what kind of things I was going to consume as a kid, like unconsciously, right?
Right.
I had to choose between, Power Rangers, or I could watch the news, which the news in Brazil is nothing like the news here. We have TV shows specifically just to show people getting shot in the favelas and stuff. It's terrible. I could get into whatever, right?
Sure.
And you kind of gravitate through life, and then at a certain point you're an adult, and now you have to choose where you're going to gravitate towards. So, yeah, I feel like you're right. A lot of people need that punch in the face, but that punch in the face can be artificial. I feel like you can create that punch in your face for yourself in a control, for example, with martial arts. Yeah.
It's a catalyst for growth. It's a catalyst for action.
Exactly. Right?
Okay. Yeah, you were saying about martial arts being a moment for growth, or a part of the process of growth.
Exactly. Seeing things, I feel like, again, like as a songwriter, you get good at getting an idea and turning it into other ideas, right? Or maybe it's just my mind that's a little weird, but
it sounds like a gift, actually.
It is, because you don't have to always go through something to learn from it, right? This idea that, well, how do you know you don't like it? You never tried it. Well, I don't need to try cocaine to know that I'm not going to fucking do it. You know what I mean?
That's probably the best example you could come up with. And I personally, like you, chose not to do cocaine because of that. I don't need to try it to know that it's not for me.
Yeah. And I'm not shitting on people who do it or don't do it. That's not it's not my place. But obviously I have a different relationship with it because Brazil has the cartels and yada yada.
Okay.
But just the idea of you have to go through something to learn from it, that's terrible. What's the point of books?
Okay.
Read it, and you learn, and then you try to apply it, and then you see what's good or what's bad.
Yeah,
right?
that sounds like punishing yourself. Like, I need to know how a bad experience feels, so I'm going to put myself in that position. That doesn't sound like very healthy growth for me, right?
Doesn't sound good to me either.
And a little while ago, I heard you describing a value of integrity, of like, if somebody were to talk shit about me, would the person they're talking to believe it? Mm-hmm. And this is so much like the Challenger personality type, that we have this really close-knit group of friends. That's our tendency. And we hold them so close, we trust them with everything, but once they betray that trust, bounce, they're out. Mm-hmm. And if that person who was being spoken to about your bad reputation, and they agreed with it, and they sided with that person, you would bounce them like that, right?
Yeah.
Because they violated your trust. It was betrayal for you. And then I also heard, when you were describing the island, if you're familiar with attachment styles, Dr. Stan Tatkin calls the avoidant attachment style the island, because they're isolated, they're by themselves. And I heard your story about your relationship with your father, and that distance being there, quite possibly putting you on an island as a child.
Very much so, yeah. And I'm sure he was one too. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
He was all about doing his own thing, but it was an endearing way. And this is the complexity that once you get off of the basics of life, oh, this person is good, this person is bad, there's this cute kind of complexity to people, even when they're doing wrong. You know, my mom had crazy anger issues, but you could relate on her vulnerability. It was a facade that was unconscious.
Yeah, that was quite possibly how she expressed sadness and fear and
concern, right?
Yeah, concern. Yeah.
Concern.
Oh yeah, if a parent is concerned about their child's safety, they might yell at them to come in from outside. Like,
exactly.
It doesn't sound like you were growing up in a very safe place. And so if your nervous system is always heightened, you may look for security in martial arts, or security in the samurai, and then security in a very strong voiced mother.
Yes. And that's the thing about the Challenger. For the little bit I've read, it's hard for us to accept that we need security and stability, because we want to be like the doers, and we're going to go and do it. I don't care. I'm going to like brave new world, right?
Nothing can hurt me.
Nothing can hurt me.
Yeah.
But you have, if you really want to do this and be like the brave guy that's going to go across the sea, and you have to have some sort of internal work that's going to make you feel safe no matter what the consequences are. And it's really hard. It's really hard. I'm scared. I'm scared of shit all the time. Like, I'm scared of not being able to give back to my family, money, work. You're scared, but what are you going to do? You know what I mean? Life is still going on. There is nothing you can do to stop it. If you know, obviously you can commit suicide, but I wouldn't recommend it, you know?
It's not an option for the Challenger, because
Exactly.
It would be, in my mind, it would be the largest version of self-betrayal.
Exactly.
And
yes.
then the self-trust there. Trusting in oneself would be completely gone.
Exactly.
And to your point of like, we want to be able to do it all ourselves. We want to be able to handle all that is presented to us by ourselves. We put so much weight and responsibility on our shoulders that we can just power through. We are strong enough to handle it for ourselves and others. And that's how empathy shows up for us.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's like, oh, that looks heavy. Let me carry it for you.
Yeah. And carry mine too, but I'm not going to tell you about mine.
Yeah. Oh God, yes. Yeah. That's so me for the longest time. And then I started to go on this path of self-discovery of like, why aren't relationships working out for me? You know, and like, it was because I had that facade and that bravado of like, I can do it all myself, and oh, that looks heavy, let me carry it for you too.
Yeah. But it's something that I've recently came across. Like, I had a breakup of 3 years, like a few months ago, and I've been learning a lot of reflection, right? And one thing that challengers have to come to terms with is that other people want to help you. You know what I mean? And to me, it's tough. Like, I grew up very lonely on that kind of spectrum of nobody really cares. Like everybody just wants something out of me. Obviously, I was deconstructing that as I grew up as an adult, right? But it is hard to accept help because you don't really think these people want to help, right? So ultimately, moral of this story is there's no bigger compliment that a challenger can give than be like, hey, I need your help. There's no bigger compliment. Like, we can forget to say I love you. We can forget to like cook you dinner. We can forget anniversaries. This is our version. Right. My version at the very least.
Right. Yeah, what you're describing. Thank you very much. That sums up the challenger for me in a nutshell. Like, absolutely, I can see that in my own behavior for years. And when we forget to say I love you, when we forget anniversaries, when we forget to cook dinner, or maybe it's not our idea to cook dinner, that to me reminds me of my avoidant tendencies in relationships. And the reason why we're having this conversation is because you posted on Instagram the other day that like the best part about being on the dating apps is you get to see all of your friends' dating profiles.
Oh yeah.
And Denver is a small town, and we can see, oh, well, I know this person through Instagram, or I know this person through Facebook. I know this person personally through Easton. You know, I've seen some Easton teammates on Bumble and
all the time,
right? And that's why we thought that this would be a good idea to have this conversation just about getting back out there.
Yep.
I didn't know you were a challenger at the time, but now we can go even deeper. And what's it been like? What's your experience like?
So I've had few but long relationships, and this breakup has been very different from my old one, from my ex-wife. And knowing that the pain is supposed to be felt, because if you don't, it's going to show up later on, right? There's nothing you can mask it with. You can alcohol, women, going out, nothing. Work, like we were talking about on the first episode, you can dig yourself through work. And ultimately is gratitude. Man, dude, I had this epiphany. You go through all the stages of grief, right? It's like somebody died, because you're not going to see that person again, right? My dad passed away when I was 23. It was 2 months before I moved to the US. He passed away of cancer. And then I had cancer later. I was like, oh, fuck. So I kind of went into it, but it was one of those that you kind of expected. You saw it coming. Where sometimes a relationship, you know it's coming, but you don't know how you're going to feel, right? So it is kind of a grieving process. And if you don't feel it, later on, you're going to hurt somebody else that doesn't deserve it, right?
Yeah.
So it's been interesting on that sense. And gratitude has played a massive part, because regardless of how I feel about the girl now, right? If I like her, if I don't like her, if I don't talk to her, I'm so grateful through the experiences that we had, the chances that I had to grow, the looks, right? The same way you have different looks with sparring. People are they're left-handed, right-handed. They prefer certain technique. You have the same kind of looks with different people that you interact with. They're a little more avoidant. They're a little more attached. They're more this. They're more that. And you learn how to deal with it by going through it. So I've learned a lot of things. I had to come to terms with a lot of things that I do wrong, and it creates that kind of feeling of hope. You know, I take a lot of ideas of hope and positivity out of bad things, right? Because that's how you get out of these huts, I think. You know, like, I feel like I don't trust people who are always positive. They're always cool. Everything's good. I'm like, what is going on?
Yeah. When are you going to explode, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
You're going to bring a fucking machine gun to the gym one of these days? Like, no, tell me what's going on. Be real, right? And that's the idea of authenticity that we've been talking so much about lately. It's like owning up to your flaws. So, yeah, it's been an interesting experience. I'm like just taking my time, feeling everything I need to feel, do everything I need to do. Because later on, there's going to be nothing for anybody to hold against me. You know what I mean? So, yeah. I mean, I haven't had one of these in a long time. I thought it was going to be very different, but, you know, you can't really prepare.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Like, if we stuff down and suppress, a tendency of the challenger is to repress. If we suppress all of those emotions that are natural and are supposed to be felt after a breakup, which is how the podcast got started in the first place, is I went through a couple of breakups and I didn't know how to process the emotions that were coming up for me. So this was one way for me to go out and seek out help, of like always be learning. How do I become more self-aware and conscious of what generally I turn to anger first? Okay, what's behind the anger? Am I hurt? Am I sad? Am I afraid? Am I lonely? Am I shamed? You know? And I relate so much to that processing of grief, because if we choose to ignore it, if we avoid it, if we suppress it, it will come out and hurt somebody down the road, somebody else who is not deserving of that hurt.
Yeah, that's beautiful, man. Because like we're all going through some stuff, you know. And I like to believe, and this comes with that self-confidence thing that we were talking about, like I like to believe that people tend to do the best they can with whatever they have, you know. And if they didn't, was usually because they're not as, frankly, if they're assholes, you shouldn't be dating them to begin with, right? You should pick up on that quick. So assuming that this person is not an asshole and you already spent a bunch of time with this person and you trusted them with issues and why is it that they did things that hurt me to the point that I wanted to break up? That knowledge of the work of sympathy and at the same time being sympathetic but also protecting yourself, right, is tough because it's a very fine line. And sometimes you have to cut people off that you don't really want to cut off. Sometimes you get cut off and you didn't want to get cut off. And owning your mistakes and learning from it allows you to later on working on something else with somebody else, right? Because it's going to be a different look. And they're going to be working on other stuff that you're going to have to deal with. And it starts from scratch, you know? Yeah. Nobody's perfect. We're all messy works in progress. But that's what makes it cool, I think.
Yeah, it's how we relate to each other, because you're absolutely right that everybody's got their stuff. Everybody's working through something. The last year has taught us that more than any other time frame in my life. Is like, well, this is out of my control. That's out of my control. The list goes on and on and on of things that are outside of my control, except for how I respond to them. So you were talking about, I've shared with this person, I've learned how to trust them, I've gone deeper with them, and then how is it that they could hurt me to the point of breaking up? And it's a question of like, were you setting boundaries around the repeated offenses, or were you distancing because of how much you would have to focus on having the conversation or digging deeper within yourself that caused you to break up?
Yeah, I love to talk about boundaries. Yesterday I saw a quote and it said something like, boundaries feel like an attack to people. Oh no, this quote is awesome. Boundaries is your attempt to keep a relationship with somebody, right? A lot of people feel like boundaries is like punishment. Oh, I did this, therefore he's putting this boundaries that I can't get into, right? The idea of boundaries is like, it's a point that you can get past. So they don't have that access anymore. And in a romantic, intimate relationship, you feel like you should have access to everything, right? But boundaries is like, look, every time you get past this point, it makes me now want to have a relationship with you. So I'm putting this here so we can keep a relationship.
Yeah, we're doing service to the relationship by having healthy boundaries.
Exactly.
And there's an unhealthy version where you're talking about putting up walls and not allowing somebody in. And then it comes down to how we communicate
100%.
Those boundaries, because it matters what you say and it matters how you say it.
Yeah. And it's a negotiation, right? I totally have the tendency of just pushing myself off. Be like, hey, leave me alone for like 2 days. Let me regroup. I can't talk about it. Like, I'm one of those people. But I know to be very sober about it. Like, I don't yell. I don't scream. I don't call names. I feel like those are all out of bounds. I'm like, hey, look, this is pissing me off. I can't think straight.
Right.
Anything I say now doesn't go. Like, leave me alone for a few days. And I have that tendency, and it's tough because like when you are working on something, it's very easy for you to go back to your tendencies first thing that happens, right? So let's say with jiu-jitsu, you are working on your arm bars. So you're very bad at arm bars, but you're working on it. Every time you try to go for an arm bar, the guy passes your guard. Then you give up on the arm bars. You're like, wow, fuck, he's gonna keep finishing me. You have to live on that fire a little bit sometimes.
Right.
But you have to have a partner that is accepting and understanding of this is what you're working on now.
Right.
And to me, and I'm sure to you as well, is the trust thing. Like, I can be open to you if what I'm giving you is not being taken care of. Because it's information that is important. If you're going to use it later on in an argument, then I'm not going to say anything. Now we're not friends anymore. Now it's
another time for a boundary.
Yeah, right?
What I hear you describing is this vulnerability that we're dancing with, right? Especially for the challenger, vulnerability is our greatest fear. Like, it's very hard for us to be vulnerable. So, and boundaries is part of vulnerability. I feel very vulnerable when I share a boundary because it gives you an opportunity to leave. And that's a really hard thing to work through in the moment. So what I hear you talking about is like, all right, my central nervous system is really heightened right now. I might be in a fight or flight mode or a fawn mode or a freeze mode, right? And I've experienced this before too. Like the person I dated before my current partner, in our conflict, pointed the finger at me and said, you, which is, for the Gottman's research, is criticism in a relationship. It's one of the four most destructive ways relationships deteriorate. And my response to that was to shut down and stonewall. And after a couple of attempts, like to your point earlier of when you're coaching, you're trying 4 or 5 different ways to get your point across. And you have to be flexible there. Okay, so my first attempt to say criticism is not okay. That boundary wasn't respected. The second different attempt was like, hey, I'm happy to discuss this. Come sit next to me on the couch instead of stand over me and point a finger at me. That boundary was not respected. Okay, now we're actually going to have to separate for a time period, right? And I can totally relate to what you're saying of needing that time to ground again, to become more grounded in myself so that I can come back and work on boundaries with vulnerability, which is already hard for most people, but it's especially hard for the challenger.
Yeah. And to your point, like when you share vulnerability, not only they have the chance to leave, but now they have a chance to manipulate
and hurt us again.
And hurt you, right? And it's like, I am not as scared of being hurt as I am to hurt somebody else, right? But when they have that information, now we have a blind spot that they have access to, right? So asking for help, which is basically what you do when you're setting a boundary, right? Like, I need you to help me. Like, we're building this together. This is my brick. Like, let's talk about my brick for a second. There's all sorts of ways that I've experienced, that I've done and I've received, that it's not a good way to deal with this. Like, well, what about my brick? What about my thing? Oh, you do that too. Yeah, okay, we'll talk about this. But I brought this up. And this is the easiest way to make challenges shut up. Like, all right, you don't want to talk about it? Fine. I'll do it. I'll fix it, right? And the problem with it is it becomes very addicting because now you're just receiving criticism. When you're really stuck with yourself and I'll just do it myself, you also become a very self-reflective person, right? And it gets to a point where you stop vocalizing your problems, but the other person doesn't stop vocalizing theirs. Right. So you get to a point that you start believing that, shit, am I really doing all these things wrong? Why the fuck are you with me? You know what I mean? So you start internalizing the criticism without vocalizing any kind of response.
Right. Because it's vulnerable to stand up for yourself.
Yeah.
And when we stand up for ourselves and we place a boundary in place and it's not honored the first or the second or the third time, well then, it makes us internalize that and it makes us get small, right? Yeah. Like, I can almost, in these moments, recall my body and my posture almost round in my shoulders, 100%. Right? And part of that is our jiu-jitsu posture. Yeah. Part of that is Muay Thai, like it's neck forward. But like, that's actual body posture. What I'm thinking of is like, what I'm feeling back into those moments is like a symbolic posture of like playing small, and we don't stand up for ourselves over and over and over again, and it becomes a really bad habit. Yeah. And then we become doormats. Then we become resentful, and that's when our anger shows up.
And that's a bad place to be.
Yeah,
I'll tell you that. Because like, to my point earlier is like, I am not an expert on anything, but I'm a very observant person, right? So it's like, man, what you said, it hits home so hard because I remember hearing getting battered, like, you did this, you did that, and just going like hands on my face, just looking down, just like breathing. And at the same time, you're dealing with your emotions, you're trying to listen and be like, maybe there's a criticism here that is actually useful. But the way it's being delivered, it just makes you pissed off. Mm-hmm. And dealing with anger is one of those emotions that is the hardest thing to deal with, because even if they are warranted, you can't act upon it. I'm not going to go punching people because they said something that made me angry, right? And I also don't want to make any decisions based on anger because I'll regret it later, right? Mm-hmm. And
we are essentially killing machines, and we can't let go of ourselves that much to get to that point.
Exactly.
We know the consequences there.
Yeah, and the same way they know something vulnerable from you, you know vulnerabilities from them. So it's very easy, and I'm sure like people go through this all the time. It starts an argument that it's about you didn't do the dishes, and all of a sudden it's like your mom didn't fucking love you when you were a kid, right? Bah, 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 bah.
Oh, that'd be so hard to hear in the moment, man.
Right? And you can't. It's a weapon. Like information can be used.
It's really powerful, yeah.
Right? So it's hard for you, and I feel like this is one of the challenges that relationships have, is understanding that in the moment, that other person theoretically still loves you, right? And if you don't believe they still love you, you also don't have to argue with them. Just break up, right? So either way, acting upon anger and just being angry at them and saying stuff that is going to hurt them, why? Why would you waste your energy on hurting somebody? If they love you, then you shouldn't do it because they love you and you should be a little more sympathetic. If they don't love you, then it's just a waste of time. Just leave and let them go,
Yeah, I hear what you're saying, that it would be out of integrity for you to use that anger in that way.
Exactly. And when it comes to martial arts, it becomes that very clear thing, right? Obviously, I'm saying anger. I'm not saying about like going and beat up on your girlfriend, right?
Anger and violence are two very different
things, right? And honestly, I was looking at another podcast, and this lady was describing that types of violence in relationships, like even microaggressions, right? Little jabs here and there.
Or throwing a cell phone or picking up a shoe. Yeah. I was having a birthday lunch with a former partner, the one that really like started the podcast, and
thanks to you.
Oh man. So I'm having this birthday lunch, and I called her out on something that had been bothering me just for a few days or whatever. And in public, it's a one-sided screaming match to the point where she took off a shoe and she threw it into the ground. Fire. And that certainly crossed a boundary for me. Yeah. And that type of microaggression and violence doesn't belong. It's a little bit more than a microaggression. Yeah. Maybe I'm not tending to excuse the behavior, but of course I'd be able to defend myself if it came to that. But like none of us want that at all, and that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about a version of anger that starts here in our stomach for the challenger, right? Yeah. And it creeps up into our chest, and then it almost erupts out of our mouth.
Exactly. Right? And it's a poison. That shit is a poison. The amount of times, because like again, my mom had crazy anger issues, and she would do stuff that I'm like, you know what? She gets shit done because she's pissed off and she throws a fit, and then people do it. And I started thinking that I should do that. The 2 or 3 times that I did it, I regret it like this. Mm-hmm. Because you act on things that it's not you, right? It's just this creeping poison. I think a lot about the Venom, the character, the Spider-Man character, is this, and you can't have that excuse. Like you don't get to say, oh, I was angry, I'm sorry, or I was drunk, I'm sorry. Like you don't have nothing. Mm-hmm. And my like I can give other people that excuse, but to myself, it's you, and you're responsible for yourself, for your emotions. You have to be. Mm-hmm. So like when you act on anger, you're really just doing a disservice to yourself, and I just let myself down. And it depends to you, what is important to you. I don't like saying I'm sorry. So I avoid doing things that is going to require me to say I'm sorry. I know I'm going to have to say it. Yeah. Because I'm going to do stuff that is wrong, that I didn't mean to, whatever, right?
Saying you're sorry and apologizing is very vulnerable.
Very. And you you depend on the other person accepting it, right? It's like, hey, I'm not perfect. Is that cool with you? You know what I mean? And that is the hard part.
Yeah, right.
Because I feel like that's where I felt very let down in my former relationship. Is like every time I was fucking up, and my fuck ups are like, I'm not saying like I went on a fucking bender, but like one time, this is like a classic me. We went to brunch at my friend's house. I got wasted on mimosas. and look, everybody knows this about me. I get tired. I fall asleep like I'm dead. So I went to the bathroom at one of the apartments. I fell asleep and I woke up. I was like, oh, hell, what the hell happened? And that was a huge deal. She thought I was somewhere else with some other person. I was like, who? Like, who? What person? Like, I fell asleep at this guy's couch, you know?
Oh, so you weren't together?
We were together.
Oh, you were together. So you fell asleep and...
We were at we were at the patio by the pool.
Uh-huh.
So I went upstairs to go to the bathroom at the guy's place.
And instead you fell asleep on the couch.
And I fell asleep on the couch. And I didn't want to fall asleep on the couch. Like, I wanted to go there and party too, right?
Yeah.
But the point is, you start developing these excuses for other people for why would they think something of you that are just not true. And you know better. And then I said I was sorry because I was. And it wasn't treated with compassion. It was like, you did something to hurt me. I was like, I didn't. Like, I didn't. Like, sure, I could have done something that turned out to hurt you. Mm-hmm. But what hurt you was your image of what I did. Like, what I actually did was not what you thought I was doing. You know what I mean?
Right.
And it's tough because, I don't have a way to prove it.
Yeah.
But if I have to prove it to a girl, to somebody I'm with, then I don't want to be with you.
Right.
Like, this is not a fight. This is not a competition, you know?
Yeah. So the story that somebody else created in their mind about where you were was bigger than the actual infraction that you would have had to apologize for.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's like, look, I'm not perfect. I fell asleep and I didn't want to, but I'm sorry. And it's a tough place to be because this is the kind of vulnerability that you have to have not only to say you're sorry, but also accept that the other person is extending the hand and not feel like now you owe them.
Right.
And I feel like that's where the challengers have a hard time. Not only they have to say they're sorry, which is already hard, and now if the other person actually forgives you, now shit, I owe them one.
Oh, okay.
You know what I mean?
I understand what you're saying there. It's kind of like keeping score. We keep score in every area of our lives. Yeah. And so like what I hear you describing is like a position one up and a position one down.
Yeah.
And that comes from either guilt or shame.
Yes.
Right? So what I heard you share in that story is your partner pointed a finger at you and what they said made you feel shame.
Yes.
Right? Like you internalized your behavior and you became ashamed of it.
100%, yeah.
As opposed to like looking at this infraction, this mistake in a relationship and having guilt about it.
Yeah.
Right? Guilt is something that teaches us how to change behavior. Shame is internalized bad behavior, thinking that we're bad because of the actions that we make.
Which is a very childish thing, right? It's like it's your parents are going like, bad boy, right?
Yeah, if you were disciplined with shame and behavior was corrected with shame as a child, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I can see how we would be taken back to that time.
That's a very good point. I never thought about shame that way. And that makes a lot of sense. Right. Because, like, I don't keep score when I forgive. I keep score when I'm forgiven.
Right.
I was like, fuck.
Right.
You know?
Right.
But it is important sometimes to just do some moral inventory and just realize that if you didn't mean to do something wrong, the fact that you did it is still your responsibility. Mm-hmm. But now you have a chance to correct it. And nobody owes you anything. So if they forgive you or don't forgive you, that's out of your control. Mm-hmm. Now it's just your time to just be better next time. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Either
with this person, another friend, or whatever.
Right. Know? Yeah. This is huge for me and what's coming up for me. Let me see if I can kind of phrase this in a way that I'm putting it together kind of as we speak. Mm-hmm. Challengers tend to go straight to anger. It's a defense mechanism that protects us against feeling vulnerability. And what's lying underneath that is that shame that we're talking about. The shame for our mistakes and the shame that we're not perfect. And where our point of growth is where we can lean into this adventure and this process and this journey called life is that letting our guard down doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to be hurt all the time, because contrary to what we believe, other people do want to show us empathy and care for us and have compassion and will forgive us.
100%. And it is so much work, because ultimately when it comes to these flight and flight type of situations, and you see with martial arts all the time, you're gonna default to a certain behavior, right? And that behavior can be practiced before shit hits the fans, right? Shit hits the fans. Is that what I said? Shit hits the fan. Yeah. I'm actually surprised that we went all the way this deep into the podcast, and that was the most immigrant thing I said.
It's all right. Let go of control. Let go. Be vulnerable here. This is a safe place.
But yeah. So ultimately, like for example, when I get scolded like that, I hate it. First of all, I hate feeling like a little child, because I'm not, right. When I get angry, I shut down. Like I shut down, literally like you're turning off a switch. Mm-hmm. And I ignore everything that is being said. I'm like, from here on out, there's nothing you can say that's going to make me interact. I shut down, because I'm not a violent person. I wouldn't even call myself confrontational, really. Like, confrontational isn't like, let's have a hard conversation. That's one thing. But like confrontation is like, well, what about you? I'm not like that at all.
Right.
But it is a reaction that comes from anger. Like, I'm pissed on the inside when that happens. And it's ultimately, when it turns down to relationships, any kind of relationship, is finding somebody who is down to learn what is it that you are working on and support you through it. Instead of being like, oh, if you loved me, you would love me for who I am. No. Fuck no. Hell no. I want somebody who's working on themselves and trying to be better. I'm not going to judge you what's better, what's not better, right? What's better for you. And I feel like that's really the light at the end of the tunnel. And it's the reason why a lot of relationships break up. And people are like, well, but we had so much in common. Like, we were doing so well. We got along, but for some reason we weren't happy or whatever, right? Mm-hmm. There is something about them that is not aligned with what they are and who they think they should be or whatever, that they should be working on. And now, not only are you working on yourself, but now you have to be sympathetic of what they're working on as well. Mm-hmm. And it's tough, but it's part of the game, you know?
Yeah.
And if you're not ready for it, that's when people are like, I'm not ready for a relationship. This is it. If you're not ready to take on the work that other people are putting on themselves, on top of you still working on yourself, just be single. Do something else.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Yeah, that's really well said. And I feel like we're going to close out our conversation there on that point of like, if you're not willing to support and be there for somebody while they're working on their stuff and you're working on your own stuff, then yeah, best to be single at that point.
Yeah. Ultimately, you have to think about, what is the point of a relationship? Why do you even do it, right? Why?
For me, it's growth.
Right?
Yeah.
Because you could very well go through life without one.
Yeah.
But that connection is something that is very growth enabling, for sure, if both people are on the same page. Mm-hmm.
Well, man, thank you so much for this conversation. If people want to get a hold of you, follow your music, check in with you on your Muay Thai journey, well, where's the best place for them to do that?
My Instagram, I'm very active on that thing. It steals my life. It's _TheWarriorPoet. My both personas are on the same account, and you can see everything on there. My website is Music by Pedro Meyer. It has all the links, and just get a hold of me. Let's chat.
Awesome. Yeah, so if they want to catch a show, because you're doing live music, and if they want to find more about your music, I recommend that they go check it out, because you're extremely talented.
Thank you. That's sweet. Thanks,
Appreciate you, man.
Appreciate you, brother.
That was a hell of a conversation. Men who do the work are present, centered, and grounded. They seek self-awareness to lead in their careers and relationships. Private groups are forming today, so start your journey at thechallengerpodcast.com.